Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on what time you're listening to this, of course. I'm your host, Captain Rob Modies. Welcome to Catch Ya Outdoors, presented by the Waypoint Podcast Network at waypointtv.com. Besides doing podcasts, I've been writing some books. Bridge to Paradise, book of short stories about travel, fishing, and life. Available on Amazon Kindle. So is What I Know About Fishing Southwest Florida, an in-depth book about fishing the waters from Pine Island Sound south to the 10,000 Islands. Book 3 is on the way. Take a Kid Fishing, an adult's guide for introducing youngsters to the world of angling. The initial edits are complete. The rewrite has happened. It is now at the publisher, and I am waiting for step number 999. This is episode 54, titled Too Close to Home. Obviously a follow-up to last week's podcast. It's needed. Turns out Hurricane Ian was a monster of epic proportions. It was also the monster that the National Hurricane Center warned us about. They said this one's going to be bad. They didn't have a handle on it a week ago. I knew it was coming. I mean, we knew it was coming. We just thought it was going to be a whole lot high. I think when I spoke to you a week ago at this time, and by the way, this is Monday afternoon. I decided to wait till the last minute to do this one to cover anything else that might happen. But I think I did the last one on a Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. And, we knew it was coming around the corner. We knew the Keys were in line for the edges of this stuff. We knew we had tropical weather. The initial track that I talked about last week was up toward the Panhandle. Not the Panhandle, but in the crook of the Panhandle. And then later, just a couple of days later, it slid down toward Tampa pretty severely. And then after that, it slid into the lower, like Charlotte Harbor, Fort Myers area. And there it stood as it got stronger and stronger. Last week, I talked about the fact that I've been through a whole mess of hurricanes. I have. I've experienced... the shortest without power was probably Wilma. I think maybe 3 days or so, maybe 2 or 3 days. I'm trying to think in order here. Charlie, we had no power for 11 days, and Irma, we had no power for 13 days. Those were all, Charlie and Irma were both bad storms. But to put this in perspective, for those of you that aren't used to this type of stuff, you live up north, you've heard about it, you haven't been around here for one. Typically, the eye of the hurricane is that's not the powerhouse, so to speak. The edges of it are, but the center of the hurricane is quite peaceful at times. If you're lucky or unlucky, I guess it depends on how you look at it, to be in the middle of it when it crosses over the top of you, everything gets calm. Matter of fact, there'll be birds flying in the eye. The sun will come out. The rain stops. The wind stops. It's very misleading. I've talked to people. I myself have never been in a honest to goodness total middle, but I've talked to people that have been, and it's pretty wild. They said it gets really calm, and it's very misleading. You'll go out to take pictures and stuff, and then suddenly the wind comes from the opposite direction. You get yourself killed. The eye of this storm was so large, of Ian, was so large that you could take Charlie, that was back from 2004, and fit the entire hurricane, Charlie, inside the eye of Ian, just to give you an idea how big this thing was. Even though Charlie reached Cat 4, almost Cat 5 category when it got to land, it did nowhere near the amount of destruction and damage because it didn't have enough outer winds to pick up all the water, and water was the problem this time. If you've watched the news, you know that. And we certainly know it here in Florida because we got water everywhere. We got it here in the Florida Keys. All the way up here in Key Largo, we had an enormous amount of water. Flooded roads, flooded yards. Nothing like what happened on the West Coast, and it even happened up in Central Florida. A couple of days ago, or was it yesterday? Yesterday, which was Saturday in my world. I know you're listening to this on Tuesday tomorrow, but no, I'm sorry, it was Sunday. Yesterday, Sunday, I-75 got closed in a big chunk because water was over it. Route 64, a bridge went out. US 41, they had water over US 41, had to close a big section of US 41. Those are two, the 41 and the 75 are two major north-south thoroughfares. 64 is not as big, but still carries people across the state. So, I mean, it was crazy. So we had a Cat 4, which I'm going to call a Cat 5 because it was 2 miles an hour off a Cat 5. They just couldn't change the notation, but believe you me, people understood what it was when it got there. I don't know. It's just, I've been looking at the pictures, and of course I have a lot of friends in that area because Janelle and I lived there for about 18 years, and I guided there for as many years. And it was just, I don't know, just terrible. I can tell you from on the ground, seeing what I saw, not personally on the ground, but friends on the ground sending me photos and videos. And Fort Myers Beach is no more. And that's where I worked out of. And I find that really sad. It's just, I don't know. There's just something about it. You're like something that was a major part of your life. I remember when I first went to Fort Myers Beach. Now, remember now, I was living in the Fort Myers area, but I was primarily doing charters up in Pine Island Sound. So I was putting in at Punta Rassa Ramp, which, by the way, isn't there anymore. And I was going into Pine Island Sound and doing North and South Pine Island Sound and inside Matlacha Pass. And so I hung out in Fort Myers proper, and to help folks that don't know, Fort Myers and Fort Myers Beach are two different towns. Fort Myers is downtown, and it's along the Caloosahatchee River, just off of I-75 until you get out to like the end of the river. That's Fort Myers proper. And then Fort Myers Beach is a series of a couple of islands, much further to the, well, not much, but further to the south by about 10 miles, 8 or 10 miles to the south along the coastline. And it runs down until it butts into Bonita. And then from Bonita, you go down toward the Naples area, North Naples and on. So anyway, I didn't go out there much, but when I did finally get out there, I mean, I went out there for some functions and things like that. I stayed at the Pink Shell several times, which is on the very, very southern tip. Northern tip, wrong way. Northern tip of Fort Myers Beach. As a matter of fact, my brother and I took our kids out there for a vacation a couple of times, if I'm not mistaken, years ago. So I'm familiar with it, but not like I was by living on it. Fort Myers is a beach town. It's a tourist town, has T-shirt shops, lots of eateries, and lots of places to stay. And most of them are old-fashioned hotels. There's a few tower-type hotels. There's like Diamond Head and the Pink Shell and other things like that. But most of the stuff down there was, I don't know, kind of hometown. The condos, there are some big condos down on the southern end of the beach. Well, all of that got damaged. I mean, just all of it, every bit of it. As a matter of fact, the most iconic place on Fort Myers Beach is called Times Square. And Times Square is where you landed when you came over the Matanzas Pass Bridge. You came over the big bridge, and you got to the top, and you looked down, and you went, "Wow, what a cool place." It, quite frankly, is no more. It just it's just gone. The destruction is thorough. And what got it was not so much wind. Obviously, that didn't help matters at all. Blew roofs off, blew windows in. But what got it was water. I honestly have not heard, and I don't even know if it's available yet, what the estimated height of the water was. I know this. It had to be somewhere around 25 to 30 feet because I saw pictures of two-story buildings with flat roofs on them that survived. And after the water went down, you can see seaweed on top. And seaweed doesn't blow on a roof and stay on a roof. So, I mean, I know that from experience. If seaweed comes blowing out of the ocean, or in this case, the Gulf of Mexico, and winds up on the roof of a building near the beach, the wind will just continually blow it off. So if it isn't going to stay up there in puddles like I saw on video. And I'm only estimating now, I'm no official, but had to be crazy high. And there are people that talked about being on their second floor pressed against the ceiling, thinking they were going to die. So there are those stories out there. And speaking of that, death toll as of this morning was 87. And I found out through channels that the only way they're listing death toll is if they identify people. So there are apparently quite a lot of others. I hate to say that, but hopefully they're wrong. But I don't know. That's what I'm hearing. People that have been in the Fort Myers area have heard helicopters going over all day, all night for like 3 days now, I guess, 3 or 4 days now. Flying, we'll call them refugees out, survivors, people that were trapped in their houses. The biggest problem we have is the Sanibel Captiva Island area and Pine Island. And if you look at your map, most people are familiar with Sanibel. Sanibel is connected by a large causeway that runs back technically to Fort Myers, and sits out in the Gulf of Mexico, visible from Fort Myers Beach. If you look across, you can easily see it, that and the lighthouse. The winds came in there full tilt boogie and wiped out a big chunk of Sanibel, but at the same time wiped out big chunks of the causeway. So there is no way to get to the island and no way to get off the island other than by water. So kind of going back to 1959 when there was a ferry before they built the bridge, what they called back then the new bridge across. Excuse me. So what you have now is the causeway. I believe that causeway is 3 miles long, if I'm not mistaken. The first break is right at the causeway is made up of 3 spans. There's an A span, a B, and a C. A span is the big one, the one that you kind of catches your eye in photographs. So right after the toll booth that you go through to cross that bridge, there's a huge chunk of the road missing. And that's right next to the Ponderosa ramp area where I used to launch my boat, and many, many other captains still do, or did. It turned that into a beach. It just literally washed it out. It's really weird. The docks are still there for the ramp area, but the ramp ain't there. And I guess the docks survived because they just went underwater. So it wasn't like they were being blown around a lot of turbulence. They were just deep in the water during this nonsense. You go a little further out on the end of the A span, and you see another big chunk of land missing. That land it was an island. What happened was the bridges kind of land on islands, little islands. That's where people went to, enjoy the beach, fish, launch their kayaks, parasails, stuff like that. And so that first one's got a huge cut through it. And then you go on to the next one, the B span, a big chunk of highway is missing at the end of the B span. So moving, we'll just call it south. It is south there, kind of. And then you land on the B island. There's another huge cut through the B island. And then you get on the C bridge. There's a cut right before you get on the C bridge. So you have 5 breaks. I believe 3 of them are bridges and 2 of them are on land. So over this 3-mile span, there's a ton of repairs that need to be done. And there is no other way to get to Sanibel with a vehicle. That's it. You don't go north. There is no north bridge. It goes to Sanibel. And then from that point, you go on to Captiva. And that's it. So the repairs will have to start, and it's going to be massive, and it's going to take quite a bit of time. Up on a little further north is Matlacha. That's the Matlacha Pass, and Matlacha Bridge is in Matlacha. That's connected to Cape Coral. And then, in turn, Matlacha is connected to Pine Island. And that's where my brother lived, down on the southern end of Pine Island in St. James City. That bridge is there. The Matlacha Bridge survived. We heard rumors at first that it wasn't there anymore, but it survived. But the lead up to it, the road, which is technically Pine Island Road, the end of Pine Island Road, disappeared. It's gone. And so were all the buildings that were on either side of it. The small buildings were like Burt's, and there were restaurants and places that we hung out at. Kayak shops and gift shops and a bait shop and a tackle shop and things like that. There's nothing there but pilings. It literally wiped the road out. The road is gone. The pavement's gone. But as far as being able to rebuild and get vehicles onto that island, onto Pine Island, it looks to me like it might be a little easier. And they're already working on it. I saw this morning that they've got trucks out there dumping fill and trying to get the sand and earth put back in, so that they'll have something to build a dirt road on top of to get vehicles on and off the island. So, Pine Island is different than everywhere else. I got to tell you, Pine Island is more like the Florida Keys than the rest of Southwest Florida. Southwest Florida is very, very touristy. Pine Island is not. Pine Island doesn't have beaches, and that's one of the reasons it's not. It's a very, very long barrier island, 17 miles long, I believe, which was mostly groves. They grew a lot of different things, everything from back in the day, bananas and, of course, mangoes now, but a lot of stuff, palms, ornamental palms and palms for sale to the folks up north. Plants, bushes, orchids, all that kind of stuff. So the population out there is local. And this has really put the locals in a bind. These are the working people. These are people that work those areas. And then a lot of them are working in Cape Coral. They just wanted to be a little quieter and be out of the Cape Coral small city type effect. They wanted to go out into the outlands, if you were, and they're stuck. They either can't get there, or can't get off, or can't get there, and there are no supplies coming in. So there is a Publix out there, there's a Winn-Dixie, but there's no way to get anything to them, and they've lost all of their power and almost all of their trunk lines, all their power lines. Looking at the aerial shots there, it's a mess. My brother's house survived. We don't know anything about it. As a matter of fact, I believe he's trying to do a look-see today, from what I understand. So we'll see what that's all about. It's just he's trying to find out what happened to it. We know the back end of the house that was facing the wind, a big chunk of the roof is gone. Now this is saying something, because this house is new. So this storm was strong enough to take a chunk of roof out on something that's supposedly built for hurricanes, as most new homes are in Florida. So we've learned our lessons. And of course, water came up. I'm going to guess he probably had 3 or 4 feet of water around that house, easy, from where it's located. Land is a little higher there than it is when you get down into Fort Myers Beach, but it's just so hard to say. But I understand he's trying to get a look-see at what happened. Other family members, my mom's good. She's in North Carolina now, or on her way. She was in a shelter at Shell Point, which is a little community just outside of Sanibel, and spent about 5 days there, I guess, before anybody could get to anybody. My sister came down from North Carolina, picked her up, and took her up there, so she'll have a place to live. She's got power. And I don't know where my brother's going to wind up. We've talked about several different places, so hopefully he'll find some place to sit down, because I can tell you right now, it's going to be a long, long time before power is restored on Pine Island. And my daughter Rebecca and grandkids are fine. They vacated the premises, came back. The house is actually okay. Again, they had no power, no connectivity, nothing like that. And then all of a sudden the power came on. So she's doing the best of the whole bunch, actually. Power, there's over 2 million people without it still. It was about 2.5 million right after the storm. So there's a lot of work to be done. And the bulk of the 2 million people are down in the Fort Myers. It's called Lee County, the Lee County and Collier County area, down into Naples. Speaking of that, Naples had a ton of damage too. I should go ahead. I've got to talk about that. Coastal Naples got hit really hard. A lot of water. Again, a lot of this damage was really unusual. There was wind damage, of course, and it really shows in Fort Myers Beach. But honest to goodness, the water was the thing. And they always say that. They talk to us about hurricanes. And when you're preparing for the storm, you go out and get your water and your batteries and your flashlights, and you try to get ready. And I was thinking to myself, you get a life jacket, that's what you really need. You need to put a damn life jacket in there in your security stuff, or a raft or something. Because let me tell you, when the water comes, it ain't stopping. And that's what did almost all the damage from Sanibel south through a big chunk of Bonita and then down into North Naples. So it's not good. The build back is the hard thing. I've seen it 2.5 times. Wilma wasn't really all that bad of damage up in the Lee County area where we were living, but Irma certainly was, and Charlie definitely was. But it was something that you felt like you had control of. When you went outside and you looked, your house is still there. You got a roof on your head. It's hotter than hell because hurricanes love summer, of course. You're doing your best to go out and find the pieces and supplies you need. The thing most people hunt for is ice. If you don't have a generator, you're going to have ice to keep the refrigerators and stuff cold, or a cooler. Gasoline becomes a serious problem because everybody's running generators. So it becomes this kind of nomadic daily hunt, like you're just out hunting for pieces and parts and crackers and cookies and whatever you can find to just kind of get by. But from looking around, it's going to end. That the power company is going to get it turned back on. I said very early in the podcast, I did a 3-day, 11-day, and 13-day. 13 days was the longest. That was Irma. That was quite a damaging storm. And that was rain, lots and lots and lots of rain mixed with the wind. And it was broad. It was a huge storm. But we knew every day we cleaned up. Every day we heard reports from outside the area. Every day we could see lights come on streets that were, a mile from us or blocks from us, and you knew that the guys were getting it done and it was going to happen. This storm is not going to be like that. And that's going to be the hard part to swallow. If you're inshore somewhat from the shoreline, and if you're living in, like, say, just off of US 41 or closer to I-75, your restoration is going to come fairly quickly. And if you're not, it's not. And I look at Pine Island and I think to myself, it's going to be weeks, if not months, before they get that put back together. Almost every single think of this, every single power pole for 17 miles is lying in the road, not the lines. Now, it blew the poles over. So I don't know. I mean, that's going to take an awful lot of manpower and a lot of work to get that done. People on Pine Island are going to be doing some serious camping. I would say I'll follow up with this. I will on a later podcast. I'll let you know when I'm guessing a couple of months anyway, maybe longer. So I will say this about the people of Florida. They are tough. We are tough. We've been through it. We've seen it. People are like, oh, why don't you just move? No, that's not what we do. We like our place. And most of the time, 99.9% of the time, it's paradise. 99.9% of the time, people are jealous of where we live. Janelle and I mentioned we're moving to the Florida Keys, and all we got were these gushing notes. Oh, you lucky people. You lucky dogs, you. I can't believe you're going to the Florida Keys. It's like heaven on earth. They're right, it is. And I'm not about to leave. And I know the people on the west coast of Florida feel the same way. Why do you think the place filled up with tourists every single year, starting in November all the way until April? Because it's beautiful there. The weather is perfect. It doesn't snow. There's no ice. You don't need a jacket. Beautiful evenings, beautiful warm afternoons, beautiful cool evenings again that you can have dinner outside. Broad beaches, great fishing. What more can you say? So it is a paradise. And I know that the people there are resilient people, and I know that they'll come back, and I know they'll work hard to get it back. What I feel bad about are the families that have been torn apart and they've lost everything. I mean, there are people over there that don't have anything. A fishing guide friend of mine, I mentioned him not long ago. I told you, I was talking about, I think it was a couple episodes ago on the podcast, Barry. He and I have these conversations about fishing, and we learn from each other. We do little tips like, what did you do to try to catch this, that kind of thing. Barry ain't got nothing. I talked to Barry yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. And he lost everything. Lost his house, his boat, his cars, everything. I've seen pictures of his house. His house is basically full of silt. He lived right on the water, lived on a canal off of Estero Bay. So he, like many other people, he's not quite homeless. Barry's a tough dude. He's camping is what he's doing, serious camping in the mud. But reality is, it's just going to be a long, long time before these people get it back together. But I know they will. So let's talk a little bit about donations here and things like that, stuff that you can do if you're outside. First of all, I went to Publix this morning and found out that all the Publixes throughout Florida, southern Georgia, and anywhere else that there's a public store is now collecting money at the register for help. And Publix is a Florida-based store, so you don't have to be worried about giving money, donating money to them at the counter, at the checkout counter, because it will go to the right places. They had a little button on it. When I went in today, you hit a button for $1. It just automatically adds $1, and you can add whatever you want. But if you just hit this button, it'll automatically add $1. And I got to think, gosh, everybody that shops, if just each person hit the $1 button, that's a lot of money. I mean, Publix is the store in Florida, is the grocery store of Florida. Red Cross. I've always advocated the Red Cross. They are, as far as I'm concerned, the best. And there are hundreds and hundreds of Red Cross people in Southwest Florida right now, handing out food, meals, clothing, all kinds of stuff. So you can donate to the Red Cross. There are others. So it's personal preference. It's up to you. I know Captains for Clean Water are working on it. There are other agencies that are collecting within the state of Florida, and I would not be afraid to donate. Just be, in this day and age, you have to be a little leery, I know. So if you want to be real safe, just the Red Cross. That's probably the absolute best way to go about doing it. If you're in the area, if you live in Florida and you can pack up stuff and send it, do that. I know they need everything. Most, my brother left his house. He got the hell out of Dodge, thank God. I think he told me he had 2 pairs of shorts, 2 T-shirts, a pair of shoes, which I think were his flip-flops, a hat, toothbrush, toothpaste, and that guy. That's all he had. It's like, because he thought he was coming back. He's like, okay, I'll be back. He ain't back. He can't. You can't get out there because the road's gone. And Lord knows what happened to the stuff inside his house. Since a piece of the roof came off, that means rain and a jillion-mile-an-hour wind came in. So it probably looks like a giant was in there just, spinning things in circles. But this too will pass. Even though it's a horrible mess, this too will pass. I think what I want to do now is a little update on the Keys and just give you some rundowns on what's going on in the Florida Keys as far as the weather stuff is concerned. The biggest problem we ran into was down in Key West. So I'm going to change gears for a few minutes. In the Key Largo area we are, the wind blew. We had broken branches, things like that, but stuff that was really easy to clean up, and we had very little problem with water. We had a lot of rain. We had a little bit of flooding on the north side of the island toward the mainland. And again, that's because water got pushed into Florida Bay by the hurricane. As you got further down, there was a little bit more wind, a little bit more junk, all the way up to the highway. But no problems. Bridges stayed, everything was fine. Key West got the brunt of it. A lot of high, heavy waves came over. I think I've heard a few restaurants that had outside seating. The seating won't be open for a while. They're going to have to work on some docks and things like that. The after deck, which is a place that Janelle and I like to hang out, that one's not open right now. And there are others like that in Key West. Key West got quite a bit of water right down Duval. That's not, honestly, that's just not unusual. Cleanup has happened. Places are back open. I have been watching the web because actually Janelle and I are supposed to go down there later this week. Our anniversary is coming up at the end of this week. So we're going to head down there and hang out for a couple of days in Key West. So we've been kind of eyeballing that to see what's going on. Plus I've got issues obviously on the West Coast. I need to follow up with family and see what's going on there too as well. So, but all in all, the Keys fared very well. One thing I did notice, I put the kayak in the water yesterday, paddled around. The water is cooler, number one. The bite was terrible. I fished a little bit, but it wasn't worth the trouble. There's so much fresh water, I guess, is poured into the local Back Bay areas that the tide has not readjusted the salinity yet. So a lot of fish just plain left. And that's not unusual either when you get an awful lot of water coming into the system. I saw quite a few. This is all the way up in Key Largo now. I saw quite a few branches in the water, obstacles, things like that you should be watching out for. In a kayak, it's not really an issue. But if you're in a motorboat and you're cruising around, I saw a couple of guys go blowing by on jet skis yesterday. I thought, man, I'm not sure I'd be wanting to do that right now. But to each their own. But I would suggest that you be careful if you're navigating. And then I'll send it back down again to the West Coast. Up. I'm down. Up to the West Coast. Navigation is a huge issue right now, all around the Southwest coast. I heard all kinds of Coast Guard radio traffic because when I'm in the kayak, I take my little portable radio with me and flip it on for emergencies, weather, stuff like that. So I'm monitoring Channel 16. And I could not believe how many Coast Guard messages were coming. Every 15, 20 minutes, they were talking about either missing channel markers, channels that have changed, sandbars that have appeared where they didn't used to be, obstacles in the water. There were boats upside down. There was all kinds of stuff. I never heard that much chatter on the marine radio before. And that was, days after the hurricane, because I didn't even bother to go out until the weather cleared up yesterday. But long story short, if you are a boater, and you plan on boating in that area, you're coming down to visit in the next month or so, you're going to have to be extremely careful because everything down there has changed. The inlets will be different. Markers are missing. There's an awful lot of markers missing. Plus, the islands themselves got blown all around. So, you've got the effect of places that don't look like they used to look. And most mariners, when we boat, we slowly but surely learn topography and we start looking around and we learn what's where and it gives us our bearings on how we navigate. That ain't going to happen right now, so you need to be aware of that. One last thought. If you are trying to get a hold of somebody that lives in the area, Cape Coral, Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, Captiva, Pine Island, Naples, Charlotte, up in Charlotte County, up around Charlotte Harbor, Punta Gorda, there's a real good chance that if you're worried about not hearing from somebody, there's a reason for that, and that's because of communications. The cell phones, I think virtually every cell tower is down in that area. So between that and the internet, connectivity is a real problem right now. So don't be surprised if you're not hearing from somebody. I know it's good to worry, but you need to know the communication's a mess, and the only way anybody's going to communicate with you is if they go outside the area. I talked to one guy yesterday. He said he drove over toward the East Coast, as a matter of fact. He said all of a sudden his phone went nuts because he hit an area where his phone suddenly connected, and he got every text message that he's been missing for like 3 days. So be aware that that's going to happen. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend, leave a review. My podcasts are scheduled for each and every Tuesday. Catch Outdoors is presented by the Waypoint Podcast Network. It's available on Waypoint and by many of your favorite podcast providers. Facebook page is Catch Outdoors. Websites, waypointtv.com and catchoutdoors.com. Until next time, get outdoors and enjoy.